The toughest for the last, okay? The toughest. The call to forgive, not to judge.
I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. The Lord is my light, the Lord is my rock, my salvation. The Lord is my refuge, guarding my life. Of whom should I be afraid? I believe I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living.
Only one thing I ask, may I live in the house of my Lord. I shall gaze on God's goodness all of my days. I shall live in the shelter of God.
I believe I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I believe I shall see the goodness of God in the land of the living. Be strong, wait for the Lord. I believe I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the
Okay, our prayer, the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born again to eternal life. As I was looking for songs for these themes, this one was a really hard one. I couldn't find a song on human forgiveness for one another. I couldn't find one. So this one is all about God's loving forgiveness and his mercy. And it was strange to me, but there just wasn't anything. Now, there must be some out there, but I couldn't find it. But I do think that there are a lot of people in our church and in the Christian life that see God as remembering every sin. In fact, he's got a book. He writes everything down. Not a single thing is forgotten, and we will pay. But that's not what Jesus shows us. I mean, that prodigal son story is one of those foundational stories. He says, my Father's like this, loves without conditions, no limits, no conditions ever, just totally loving. Well, that's, some people introduce me to that God. I say, keep him away. I don't want to know your God. I don't like your God. I like my God. He's forgiving and loving. Some people say, well, then you can do anything you want. You're not going to live a good life if you got to have some fear. Really. I think through education and good formation, we can learn about a loving God, a forgiving God, and then want the same in our life. And that's the thing, to be able to, imitate or integrate into our lives the way that we see our God, that we really are made in his image and likeness. So, this divine vocation or strong inner prompting. And again, we have a wonderful story. The woman caught in adultery. Only in John's gospel, here's the case put before us. Then the scribes and the Pharisees, and by the way, anytime it says the scribes and the Pharisees, get ready for action, okay? They're going to be attacking Jesus or something. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? They said this to test him. That's their real motive, so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Now, again, I don't know the original language, but it's always interesting when an adverb gets thrown in there. This woman was caught in the very act. The very act. The assumption to me is they were doing it when they walked in that door. They were doing it, and they caught them in the very act. I wonder if there's a word in whatever the language of John's gospel, I don't know if it's Aramaic or what, but whatever the language, if there's a different word for they were about to do it, they just did it, or they were doing it, But that's what it's saying, the very act. Busted. Okay. So, they set Jesus up. Here's the test. Now, again, this is a powerful gospel, because this is what I think I would call, this was what do they call it? Not a clean case, or a clean-cut case. They've got him. They've got Jesus because of this case. She was caught in the very act, and the law said something very specific about this. Jesus' response. Let me go back. Did it say there? Okay, now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Okay, she should be stoned to death. That's the law. So they asked what he says to this. So Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, Let the one among you who is without sin to be the first to throw a stone at her. Again he bent down and wrote on the ground. What did he write? Doesn't say. Some commentaries try and fill in the blanks. There's a famous one that said, well, he began to write down their sins. And so as he wrote them down, because it's a very interesting follow-up sentences, and in response, after he wrote the second time, whatever he was writing, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman, one by one, and beginning with the elders. So the suggestion is, like how you would know this and how he would know what's in their mind, but that he wrote a sin and then this one recognized and he walked away. There's no real indication, but it's curious the way it's written. Whatever he wrote, somehow it looks like he was challenging them, and they just began to walk away. So the conclusion of this story. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She replied, No one, sir. Then Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on do not sin anymore. And there's a lot of variations on this, the way that this is translated. From now do not do this sin anymore. There's some, anyway, I've seen different. But let's get real again. This woman was caught in the very act. So she was doing the big no-no, and she got caught doing the big no-no, and she gets dragged from that bed, dragged to the street. Now, in what condition? If she's dragged from the bed, I don't think they cared if they cloaked her. Little more drama. Take her naked, throw them right, this woman in front of all these men and in front of this great teacher. How was she feeling? I mean, embarrassed, humiliated, mortified, and ready to be mortified, ready to be killed, you know. She knows what the penalty was. So they're all picking up stones, all of them, like orangutans over there. They got all their stones ready to throw them and kill her. Imagine being stoned to death, just hit with stones until you drop dead. So the little story, she's caught in the very act, dragged from the bed. It's what I think it says. Where's the man in this? He gets away scot-free. Were you thinking that, ladies? Huh? Were you thinking that? Where's the man? Wow, what a creep. So the Pharisees are making a case to trap Jesus. This is the real thing. Maybe they wouldn't have even cared about this happening. Maybe they knew this happened a lot with this woman, whatever. But here was an opportunity to get him. Stone her or forgive her? That's the question. Now, if Jesus said, well, follow the law and stone her, then I suppose they'd say, oh, Mr. Big One on forgiveness and compassion. I guess it's not all that real after all. And if he said forgive her, they say, oh, so you have no respect for the law of Moses. You're better than Moses? You're higher than Moses? Who do you think you are? So they said, we've got him. He cannot escape. And they press him for an answer. Come on, tell us what you do. Jesus doesn't give an answer. Instead, he asks the big question, who is without sin? Who is without sin? And then says, therefore, do not judge, forgive. Now, I said some of those other things were right at the center and in the foundation. I believe it, but this one is too. In fact, this one ends up in the Our Father in a very interesting way. And we'll come to that in a few moments. But I think one of the biggest obstacles to finding peace in our life is not being able to forgive. I think there are certain things I think that kill the spirit. Jealousy, hatred, can't forgive, fear. When those get lodged in us interiorly, aside from the emotional impact and the stress they may cause, I think in our spirit, something leaves, something dies that's essential for us growing as integrated whole people, people that have a deep spirit of life and grace in us. Something really happens wrong when we have to judge and cannot forgive. And I don't think most people do it absolutely. I did it absolutely with Tom for 3 years, and so we may go in and out of absolute cases, but many times it's just little things where we're not really very forgiving, but it's not a total package, it's just kind of a halfway thing. But again, we ask, what is Jesus asking of us, from us? What does he want for us in this? I don't think he wants us to forgive to please him or even please the person we're forgiving. Michael offended me. He didn't get a good shot when I wanted one. Obviously, the camera was at the wrong angle, and I can't talk to him anymore. Or he hurt me in some way. The forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about what happens in me if I don't forgive, I think. So the big story is the one that is presented by Jesus' question. Who is without sin? Really, is anyone without sin? Now, I know we say Mary and Jesus, and those are great theological issues, huge theological issues, which I wouldn't even get into, maybe never. But otherwise, we say we're all sinners, all of us. In fact, it's why every single Mass, after we say the sign of the cross and greet one another with the Lord be with you. No, the Lord be with you. Okay, thank you. Now, let us stand before God in our sinfulness, aware of our sin. Because we better start there. It's the great equalizer, the leveler. we're all sinners. We're all in this together. Nobody's perfect. Let's not judge one another. Just acknowledge we're all sinners. Let's start from there. Who can judge? Well, this one is, I want an answer. The answer is nobody. We can judge an action. We can judge the results. But we can't judge each other. I mean, that's, I think of some of the most atrocious cases. I've heard some really awful things in marriages and all, and really mean stuff. Well, I often say to somebody, well, I think most of the time it's the men. I think we're a mess. We've been trained not to feel. We've been told if we feel, we're sissies. Most men, I think, about 95% of the interior stuff of their life, they'd never share with anybody. Most men. Women share everything. Even on a date, they go in the bathroom, and then they start telling everything about what they're feeling and everything. It's just amazing. But men are pretty tight-lipped about most stuff and how it affects them, because they do not want to go to that vulnerable place where they would cry or break. They're just trained not to, But who can judge? We just can't. And even when we can judge the actions, some people do awful things to their partners in marriage or whatever. But sometimes if you find out how broken they are, it doesn't excuse what they've done. But at least you can begin to understand some people have been so wounded as children, they don't know how to trust, they don't know how to open up, they don't know how to do any of it. And some repress it for years and years, and then it bubbles out or blows out at one point, and they walk out of a marriage, and you can judge the action. But boy, I've seen in my priesthood a lot of hurting people, a lot of broken people. And I suppose it's been one of them, mostly at St. Joseph's, because there were so many people. I was counseling till it was coming out my ears, and I just got case after case after case after case of people who had been hurt deeply in their early childhood, and they never got through it, never were healed, and it's leaking out at 20, 30, 40, 50 in big ways, big ways. It gave me a whole different look at healing ministry, and it was a big life changer for me. Big one. What happens to us when we judge? What happens to us when we forgive? What happens to us when we don't forgive? If we don't give forgiveness, can we get forgiveness? And why is this so important? Well, I think that second to last one, if we don't give forgiveness, can we get forgiveness? In the Our Father, this is what we say. We have the audacity. Jesus taught this prayer. So he's stuck in this, the only prayer he teaches us. And they said, Jesus, other teachers taught their disciples how to pray. You teach us to pray. So he says, okay, when you pray, say this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, blah, 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 blah. And he says, and then you say this to the Father. And Father, you forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Sister Sharon was barking at me this morning when we were coming in. I don't know what she's saying. So, of course, I'm not going to forgive her. So I say to God, you forgive me as I forgive her for barking at me. But I don't forgive her for barking at me, so don't forgive me. That's what we're really saying. And I think to say it any other way would not have its impact. But the implication of forgive me as I forgive them, and I have to face the fact, but what if I don't forgive them? If I can't forgive, why should I expect that I could be forgiven? That's a very provocative way to say that. So some random scriptures, they're in there. If you ask for this page, I give it to you. There, you can put it on your browser, forgiveness in the Gospels. You'll get all kinds of quotes. Forgiveness in the Old Testament, all kinds of quotes. So the big question is, which came first, huh? Chicken or the egg, huh? This is it. Do we forgive or be forgiven? What has to happen first? I don't know. Probably a good case could be made for each. But, if we do something that's really hurtful and we really see the hurt, but somebody forgives us, sometimes that is so formative in us that it changes our way of understanding forgiveness forever. But I suppose, too, we could be taught from an early age to forgive others and learn the reason why it's so important. I think with little children, that's why we say, shake their hand. I don't want to shake their hand. Shake their hand. And I don't think it's enough just to make them shake their hands. But if in childlike language, a person can be led or taught to understand the power of forgiveness, maybe ask them how they feel when they don't forgive. I don't know. There's experts around here that know that. But forgive or be forgiven. I don't know which is first. Maybe both are just simply important. And again, I think Jesus he's got a plan for us. He's got something he wants us to get out of this. So, there is the great case that comes up. Now, this involves some numerology, okay? Numerology is really big in the scriptures. Numbers have significance. So let me ask us, what is the worst number for us? 13. Okay, it's most unlucky. It's the one. So I only know one building ever in my life that I can recall that has a 13th floor. It's the one that Christine's company has up there in San Francisco. And the room that her company gives is room 1313 on the 13th floor, I think it's 1313. I love that room. I love it. Because this is so stupid. Imagine intelligent people having a building that says 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. I mean, really, we're intelligent people. But could you sell that room on the 13th floor? Would people want to come into your business if it was on the 13th floor? And what if something did go wrong? Then would I have to say I was a fool? I never believed in this? I guess. So 13's our bad number. What's our luckiest number? 7. Well, in the Bible, 7 is the number of perfection. Whenever 7 anything, that they're saying just by using the number, this is perfect, this completely fulfills, this is the fullest integration, it's plenitude. There it is. What's the worst number in the Bible? 6. And you know why? You just are about to get 7 and you slip down that ladder. It's the worst one. I remember in the Holy Name community, I don't know which sister told me this. I think it was probably Sister Mary. She said that in her novitiate, the nun would put a plate of chocolate candies on the table and say, now pick the one you like least. That's the one you should eat. This was to form a person into discipline and sacrifice. Really? No, I know which one I want. It's the best, and I want 2 of them. That's how I'm thinking, But 7, 6 is the worst number. So 666 is the image that we have for the devil numerologically, because it's 3 strikes you're out. So 6 once is bad enough, but 6 3 times, it's a numerology way of stating the worst evil. 1 away from 7, but 3 times. 7's a perfect number, but 10 is also, it's not as perfect as 7, but 10 is perfect because of the very nature of how it multiplies. You saw it in the first talk about 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. It just multiplies perfectly that way. So this is a great scene. I would love to be a filmmaker on some of these. And this one, Peter asks this question of Jesus. Lord, how many times must we forgive? And right away he gives the answer. 7 times? Bless you. So not only does he ask the question, he gives the answer because he says, I'm going to get a gold star on this one. I know the answer. It can't be better than 7, right? So Jesus says, no, not 7. I say 70 times 7. Now this is a great number. 7 times 10, 7, the most perfect number, times 10, a perfect number, which equals 70. Then that by the perfect number again. I mean, we're talking about perfection upon perfection multiplied so many times. It's not 490 times. That's what the number equals. But this is what it is. Is this correct? No, it's not. Jesus is saying, no, not 70 times, 7 times, not 490 times. Rather, I say, always, 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 always. he's saying it's not a number of times, it's you must be a forgiver always. It has to be in you. You must be a forgiver. It's not the number of times you forgive. That's what he's asking for us. How we get there now is the challenge. But what happens to us when we don't forgive? This is rhetorical again. Maybe you'll do it in sharing in your group. Maybe if you're daring, you'll share a time when you didn't forgive and have your reasons for it. But I'll tell you, I hear it in confession. Father, I have to confess, I hate my father. I haven't talked to him in 3 years. I say, well, where does he live? Is he in Mexico? No, I live in the house with him. Really? What happens when you pass him in the hall? We both look away. Shame on Daddy. He should be the bigger man. But both of them continue, we will hate and not talk. Wow. And then I hear, I guess it's worse, Father, I've hated my dad for 5 years. So, well, where does he live? Well, he's been dead for 2. And you still hate him? Yeah. He's dead. He's under the ground for 2 years. And the hate, he doesn't hate him, he hates the one living in him. You know that old song, is it by Cole Porter? I've got you under my skin. I've got you deep in the heart of me. So deep in my heart, you're really a part of me. I've got you under my skin. I think that's supposed to be a song about love. But love and hate, the same line, just a different side. What happens to us when we don't forgive? When hatred for somebody or refusal to forgive just lives in us. Now, if I've said this in every other talk, and I have, I'll say it again here. It's not about judging or condemning. We may not be at a place where we can say, I want to forgive. Maybe we can say, I want to. I know I need to, so I want to, but I'm not ready yet, Lord. That's an honest prayer. I ain't ready, okay? But I know I need to. Forgive us our debt, some translations say, our Father, as we forgive others' debts against us. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We have this expression, somebody hurts us, and say this Tom in my life, and I didn't talk to him for a couple of years, and so somebody junior year has noticed, well, I don't think I saw them together for all the sophomore year, and we lived there together for the first 2 years all week, and then for the last 2 years, like for 6 weeks at a time, couldn't leave the campus. We were like prisoners there, and we're always there, all the time. Somebody says, Perry, I haven't seen you talk to Tom in 2 years. He owes me a debt. He owes me I'm sorry. And I won't forgive him till he says that. That's the debt sometimes. Until they ask for my forgiveness, they don't get it. He owes me an apology. It's the debt. Pay up. You ask for my forgiveness, then I'll forgive you. You don't, forget you. It's kind of like that. My friend used to say, hurt me once, shame on you. Hurt me twice, shame on me. You're out like a light. Do it once, you're out. But twice, then shame on me. I'm a fool. I forgave you. Why? I think Jesus is asking something for us that's, again, very transformative. And there's this call, a very strong inner prompting to get us to get this. The big story, who's without sin? Who can judge? What happens when we judge? What happens to us when we forgive? What happens if we don't forgive? Can we get forgiveness if we don't give it? Why is this so important? I do have to do a huge footnote, and I realize this is an area where you have to be so cautious because, and it could be someone in this room or many people who have been very hurt very deeply. For example, I'll give the bad one, the worst one, is sexual abuse cases. The damage is so incredible. I hear this a lot. And I should say, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm assuming that sexual abuse is the worst, although I'm sure, I feel sure that physical abuse can be right up there with it, depending on how much, but so is verbal abuse and emotional abuse. Even verbal and emotional abuse or neglect, that people, or like if people may not verbally abuse their kids, but turn off the love when they don't do what they were asked to do and go silent on them. It's terrible for kids. And kids don't have a voice. They can't stand up to a parent or somebody who has hurt them in this way, so they're silenced. They lose their voice. And what happens to a kid who loses their voice for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? So now they're a teenager, they went through abuse, and they've never told anyone, or they did, and they didn't get rescued, and that's sat in them every day. They've been filled with shame. They've been filled with feeling they were at fault, all kinds of stuff. What damages happen? The psychologists say all kinds of things. Their boundaries are broken. They don't know how to trust. They lose their self-esteem. They carry shame. These things are critical in deforming a child. So I say all of what I'm saying about forgiveness, realizing there may be many cases where people can't forgive yet. They don't know how to get there because they've carried such pain and they have been so deformed by their experiences of their life. So I don't say this blandly, like everybody should forgive. Everybody should face the reality or the possibility of forgiveness and face the question, is there a way for me to get there? I heard somebody once, a psychologist, say, I know that priests get up there and say, you must forgive. Nobody can tell somebody they have to forgive. That's a personal choice, and I agree. Nobody has to. It's their right to hold on to it till their grave if they want. But I would say this, from a spiritual point of view, if you want peace, you have to forgive. You'll never be at peace. A person will never be at peace if they can't let go of anger and hatred. And there are pathways to get there. I really, again, if somebody forgive the Holocaust, then I think there is a way to find forgiveness. But it's work. It's work, and they have to be guided and helped and supported. But if I had anything to say to people, I say it as often as I can from the pulpit, come and talk. See if there's a way for you to find it. Now, I do this thing with people when they come, and I tell them I'm not a psychologist. This may not be sufficient, but maybe if you like this, you may want to go and finish your work or get into it more deeply with somebody who's well-trained, because I'm not. But I do this thing where I have them write a letter to the person to try to cough up all their anger and name as much as they can. Then this piece where I show them how daily to take Jesus' words to heart. He says, pray for your enemies and bless your persecutors. These are real enemies and persecutors who abuse children, and maybe they were abused. And again, we may not be able to judge them in their heart, but we can judge the actions because they're so damaging. But there's a way to get to a place of forgiveness and find peace. And even if somebody does the first one very well and therefore does the second one, there's still another step, I believe. It is, you're an adult now, and you have to know how to set proper boundaries. So let me give this case. This man abuses his children or child. And this child grows up and he's hated his father, whatever, for all this time, uncle, whoever, whatever. And finally goes through a process where they've really found peace. And they can say this, Father, every day now I pray for this person. Every day I do. I want God to heal them and love them. I don't want them punished. I don't want them jailed. I just want them never to repeat this, and I want them to find healing and even to forgive themselves. I really pray this for them. I've stopped hating. That's doable. It's hard. But they better take this step, because this daddy of mine is grandfather to my kids, and I know what boundaries are. They will never be alone with them, not because I hate them. That's not the reason. I have to protect them. And I don't know that I can trust. So boundaries are very important. I can set my own now. I'll never be trespassed again like this, but I have to protect these kids. And I supervise them always. And I made it clear to my wife or my husband, never alone. And maybe I revealed because this happened to me, and I think this is a different person now, but I'm not going to take the chance. Always supervision. Kids don't have to know why. And there may come a day when they do know why. But I think that step is something we have to do even if we do the other two. But that's up here. Underneath it all is, do I need to forgive? And I think Jesus says, you do. You really, 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 really do, because forgiveness is what opens the spirit and frees it and gives it life. And I'm not speaking as a psychologist, although I think it's maybe good psychology. I'm speaking from a spiritual point of view that gives this freedom of spirit. So I will say this too, that the prayer of St. Francis for me as a kid was a really important prayer. I think the idealism of it is tremendous. And I was thinking as I was reading it before, that thought entered my head, how much this prayer meant to me as a kid. I could say this and just feel off the chart. And I don't know, I've never had kids, but I'm thinking a prayer like this, I think, could be an amazing prayer to say with your kids, every night for a week or a month. Say, let's pray the prayer of St. Francis. It's so rich and beautiful. And then maybe talk about some of these things. And especially in that second half, it is in giving that we receive. It's in pardoning that we are pardoned. I believe that's true. What a way to guide them through life to learn this, and to learn it in this deepest part of their spirit as they pray this to their God, and begin to experience the truth of this deep in their spirit. So let us end this with this final prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is dying that we are born into eternal life. If you found this useful, and if you know somebody that you think would gain from it, you may want to share with them and give them the dates, and it might be something that would be of value. And it doesn't matter to me if they're in the parish or not. But I really, really think that for me, the gift of this day is to be able to spend the time that really is necessary to go into any one of these parables. They are so rich. There is such deep spiritual truth in them that you can't do it in 10 or 15 minutes on a Sunday. The age differences, everything. It's impossible task to preach something that has significance. And I don't know about for you, but I think if I look back in my history, I couldn't name 10, maybe 20 homilies over 65 years that I'd say, this touched me and I never forgot it. There's just a few. So I do not kid myself. I don't think that people remember my homilies to a great extent. Maybe there's something I said once and it touched them. I know I've done some crazy things. I did something once, and I said, and I'd kicked them out of the house, and they said, "Oh, Father, you showed your leg." And that's what they probably remember that for the next 40 years. Really? That wasn't my point. And when I've been told in all my training programs, especially the last 2-year one I went through, Good Leaders, Good Shepherds, Good Leaders, whatever it is, they said, when people come up and say after Mass, "Father Perry, that was a wonderful homily," I always say thank you, and I know I gave them warm fuzzies. I'm a preacher that gives warm fuzzies. I think I make people feel good a lot, I think. But that doesn't mean they got what I was saying. So they told me I should always say this when somebody says, "Father, it was a wonderful homily." And I say, "Really? What did you like about it in particular? What part did you like? What's the thing that affected you most?" And they you said something about life or forgiveness. Okay, thank you. This is what I'm saying, you say this in the homily, it's very brief and it's very hard to make the point unless you come up with an example that is so powerful. A lot of it is just warm fuzzies. But this day I really value, and this is doing something to me too as I give this again and again. It keeps asking me to go deeper into these. You can't give what you don't have, and it works the other way around. If you give it, it starts to do something to you. So the more I say this stuff, it's like, is this truth, or are you just saying this? Do you believe this? And I do. But it keeps pushing it deeper into me. And so I'm grateful for you for that opportunity. And so therefore, if you can share it with anybody else and they want to come, tell them it's free with a hook, but tell them it's free. And I'd love to have them come. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.